I believe that we are streaming live. So, hello, everybody on Facebook. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tricia Parido, and this is Mastering the Drop. And today, I have two guest speakers, potentially a third one that's coming in. I'm hoping that Rebecca will join us. And I'm going to make sure to take a quick moment to introduce them. But first, I thought I'd share with you why we're here today. This is Mastering the Drop. This is our Living in Your Freedom series for the month of March. And what we're jumping into, or what we've been diving into so far this month, is living free. And the first path that we need to journey is loving and honoring ourselves. So, making ourselves the priority and taking care of ourselves, from the inside out, which is, truly what brings, clarity, purpose, integrity, pride, and direction to our lives. And it really provides us with that freedom. So the first episode was clarity. Hopefully you saw that one, as well as episode number 2, which is purpose, because today in episode 3, we're talking about integrity, and more specifically, integrity as it applies to a recovery lifestyle or a recovery journey, and recovery from, well, just about anything. So for all of you that know me, you know that I believe in that there's an entire population of the not so normal phases of addiction. So it can be anything from, chemical substances to process and behavioral things, but also mental health. That's a recovery journey. So if we're talking about, I don't even know. I don't even want to start listing the mental health issues that we struggle with or battle with, especially in this period of the pandemic. We've had to do a lot of work on resilience and stay focused on depressive states and anxiety and all the things. So I think it's, just truly important that we realize that life is a recovery journey, because nobody goes through life smooth sailing. And if you do, wow, my hat is off to you, because that's not at all what my life journey has looked like or felt like. Sure, I love my life. My life is amazing. I have a spectacular, supportive, loving husband. I have amazing adult children, and my grandchildren, wow, they're super beautiful. I live in an amazing community. I have a wonderful environment that surrounds me, but that doesn't mean that I'm not faced with daily challenges of having to figure out what my next recovery journey is, which for me looks like a lot of autoimmune disorders after that presented after my 8 years of sobriety journey, and my 25-year story of life recovery from lots of things like eating disorders, disordered eating, food addiction, shopping addiction, people-pleasing, codependency, overbooking my calendar, and perfectionism. So, that's just a little tidbit about me, but it's a daily thing. It's a daily journey. And so, I think it's really important, especially we're talking about integrity here, that anybody that saw my post yesterday, I talked about, treatment programs, and then I went live earlier on Instagram talking about that post and what I truly meant by that, which is, we all have our own journey that we need to follow, and that we need to embrace. And we have to make sure that we're finding the providers that speak our language, and, learning how to be our own advocate, which in 2 weeks will be our topic. Right? Laura's nodding her head because she's super excited about that topic, and has a lot of great stuff to bring to us for that. But, we have to know what we don't know. We need to know before we start a recovery journey, but we also need to know what we don't know. We need to know about our recovery process after, the traditional processes of therapy or therapeutic interventions, and treatment programs and protocols and things like that, because there's that now what's next period. And this is where, true personal integrity comes in, because, do we rely on, the standard protocol, or do we want to sit and get to know ourselves and go, wow, what do I really need? what is it that I really want? How do I want to hear, see, feel, experience my environment? How do I want my environment to experience me? And, that's what my program's all about. It's that assertive continuum of care. So everything that's included in my Transform in 360, or if you're one of those that have been, especially invited to evolve, that program is just, all about, that whole transformation and that reinvention, as well as that inviting of the environment and how to incorporate that into our active lives as a participant. So I have a really long story. I have a lot to say, and I'm super excited about having this conversation with you ladies. I don't want to kill this by trying to introduce you guys appropriately. So I'm going to scroll through my notes here really quick, because Octavia is the CEO, co-founder of Meraki Soul Transformation Network and Soul Academy. She's a recovery doula and a transformational coach. And Laura is an advocate for adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. She's a CSA advocate living with dissociative identity disorder, and she gives talks about her experiences with trauma treatment and about living with DID, and how she learns to embrace her trauma story to find healing, peace, and wholeness. I will be putting everybody's direct contact information into the chat when we're finished, so you'll know exactly how you can book an appointment with me or just connect with me. You'll know how to get Octavia, you'll know how to get in touch with Laura. So, if one of us speaks your language more clearly, then absolutely, this is about collaboration, not competition. I believe that there's far too much competition in this industry as a whole, as coaches, as lifestyle gurus, as recovery treatment providers. I think we all have our special gift. We all have our special approach. And I think it is just so important. And I'm so feeling so blessed that you guys were open enough to come in here, get on my Facebook page, go onto my YouTube channel, and share your greatness, your journeys, your passion with the people that are here and listening. So anyway, without further ado, because we're going to try not to take up too much of your time, guys. Really our goal is to come in here for 30 minutes. It's not going to be 30. It's probably going to be closer to, 40, 45, because as you can already tell, I can be long-winded. I have lots to say, but also, Octavia and Laura have very important, messages to share. So, with that, we're talking about individual recovery truth. Right. And I brought this up, we all need to say, this is what it looks like, feels like, and is for me. That is not going to look like the recovery journey of any other specific person, because for me, right, like I had all kinds of things compiled up over like this big, over a 30-year period of time. Like my story starts at age 4. And I didn't even go to treatment until I was 43. But I've been in a recovery process since I was 25. And so, it shapeshifts and it looks different. And Laura, I know that you have some really amazing things to talk about with regard to structural integrity when it comes to this specific, but I thought we would first, have Octavia share her thoughts about this individual recovery truth, because I think those two things really feed very well with each other. So Octavia, if you wouldn't mind, share with everybody what you told me about individual recovery truth and what that looks like for you.
Well, I'm Octavia, and I am so excited to be here because I love sharing my story of my recovery, because it started out very traditional. I was diagnosed with a mental health disorder at age 28. I'm much older than age 28 now. So it's been, 25 years or so maybe 30. I'm not sure. I'm in denial over that. But I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder. And at the time, they didn't know what bipolar 2 was. It didn't act like bipolar 1, but it had some characteristics of bipolar. So we're going to throw you into this. And we're going to give you some medications, and we're going to do all these things. But traditional therapy did not work for me. I was scared of the stigma. I was scared of, I came from a background of you can will yourself away from recovery. You can will yourself through recovery by just stopping whatever you needed to stop. And so I medicated my mental illness through drinking. And I found out very quickly that all of the things that made me shy, I quickly was not shy anymore. And it was opened up this whole new fantasy world for me. And several years in, I learned that I was not a very nice person who drank. And so due to a lot of just, but I was always I was a professional person. I wasn't, the typical drunk that you see on the side of the road. I always had a job. I had a beautiful home in Estes Park. I had all of these things. And so it was hard for me to identify that I even had an issue. And so finally I decided that I was going to stop drinking. And I started individual groups and therapies. And I went like every single day for 2 years, and I wasn't getting completely better. Like I just kept, having these ups and downs. I'd get going really quick, really well. And then all of a sudden I would just crash off the end. And it was there, my mental health was not being addressed with the addiction piece. And I started going to 12-step groups. And it really provided me a good basis for me to learn recovery and a design for living and a lingo and a community. That's where I learned that community is so important. And for me, over these years, so I've been in, addiction, substance abuse recovery for over 10 years. And it wasn't until this year, the pandemic, that I decided that my main recovery needed to be mental health, that I needed to find something that helped me get through the meshing of the crazy that went on in my brain. And I use the term crazy loosely for my own description of me. And the turmoil that went on in my brain. And so I started to see recovery as different. The traditional methods and therapies just did not work for me. I wanted a more soul level experience. I wanted a holistic experience that looked at myself and what worked for me. And so the last year I have been on a journey in really understanding who I am at that soul level. What are my blocks and my restrictions that are holding me back? What are the pieces that I have to balance? It's not just stopping drinking. It's not just managing my mental health. It's meshing those things together and understanding who I am. And then stepping out from the stigma, because that's where my freedom comes from, is to be able to say, ta-da, I'm in recovery, rather than, oh, I'm an alcoholic. I'm a woman who is in active and sustained recovery. It doesn't matter if I'd have slips. It doesn't matter if I have fallen off the wagon, if I've had horrible mental health days. My individual recovery means it's me. And I get up off the horse whenever I have a bad day and I continue on. And I look to see what the next thing is. I have the trifecta. I have an eating disorder. I have, substance abuse. I have mental health issues. But I've learned that through the holistic recovery process, when I say holistic, I mean the whole person. So the holistic. is that I am in alignment with my soul. I am in alignment with who I am, and I am in alignment with what my purpose is in this life. And that is to help other people.
I love that. Thank you. And that resonates for me, a lot because, there was very, very similar, right? Like I was an active daily drinker and then, at some point in time developed, like this crazy, generalized anxiety with panic.
Mm-hmm.
And then, my medical professional, she prescribed me Xanax, and I was a grown adult. I knew I wasn't supposed to drink with it, but what I didn't know were the things that I needed to know that she didn't know either. Right. She learned after was the synergistic effects of the two, which created a physiological addiction, which I had never faced before. And that was, like super crazy. And then, realizing that, but, for me, the traditional methods for healing that, so the medically supervised detoxification to make sure it was safe, because I felt, wow, my physical body needs love and attention as well. I need to make sure that my blood pressure is okay, that my liver is functioning okay. And I need to make sure that somebody's monitoring all of this repair. And then, and I found a 30-day program that was very specific, because although I wasn't active in my eating disorder, I knew that was part of, part of my history and part of my problem. So I went to an amazing all-inclusive, right? Like we're talking like true, originally true co-occurring disorder program for women. It was small, it was boutique, it was a home, because I'm like, look, man, I need to learn how to open the refrigerator without grabbing a beer. I need to learn how to go to the grocery store and, and all of these things. And we did those things together there. And so that traditional program worked for me. It was the transitional part that didn't work for me, that's where I had to create the next, because the social supports it just wasn't me. It wasn't my MO. It was never going to sit well for me to sit down and show up for the same meeting day after day at the same time of day, looking at the same faces, telling the same tired old story over and over again. Sure, I want to help the next person, but it wasn't about sitting in and wallowing in and ruminating in and holding on to, all the reasons, that got me there. Right. So, I sought a different path, and I went to school, and I learned what happened to me as far as that physiological addiction, because, again, didn't know. And I learned all about that. And then I got hooked. Right. And so, I studied everything there was to know about process, behavioral, and chemical addictions from a treatment standpoint, a counselor standpoint, a psychological standpoint, and from a coaching standpoint. I mean, I did my capstone on coaching as an effective therapeutic practice. And I incorporated. So all of that is in my program, and I matched it and married it to all of those things that were working for me, and went, oh, wow, look, I've got a really effective program here. And I'm getting, of course, high success rates and whatever, but that was for me. That was what was going to work for me, because I'm super, I'm a learner like that. So, but, when we talk about Laura's story, like that integrity is different. So when we're looking at, what she's talking about, her structural integrity, like for her recovery journey, like that needed to look even more different, because we're talking about it at a whole different level of mental health recovery need. And Laura, why don't you, because I don't want to butcher it either, right? Like, I don't want to try to tell your version there. You gave me, we've had several conversations. It doesn't matter. What does that, tie into looking like for somebody like you?
Yeah. It's interesting hearing both of your recovery journeys, because I got to thinking about it, and I hadn't thought about that before. And so hearing what you guys said, like you said that your story started at 4, Tricia, and mine started at 2. And I grew up in a religion. I grew up in Christian Science. And so there was no medical intervention ever. And so for me, treatment for me was spiritually. So I was always working with practitioners. Like I'd get depressed and I'd call and I'd feel better because that was what it does. But then I'd slip back, and that went on for decades. And then I got into the traditional route back in 2014 when at 44. And at that point, I just knew that I had major depression. Didn't know why. I also knew I had noticed how I would be having conversations with adults in different settings, and they would say something that would get me excited, and then they'd give me this weird look, and I'm like, huh. And all I could see was, yeah, I'd gotten kind of excited, maybe a little immature, but I noticed those looks. I'm like, what's going on? And then my dad died in 2016 when I was 46. And then it was at the end of that year that my head started going through every trauma memory I could consciously remember. And then as we got into 2017, we went into the stuff I had no idea had ever happened to me. So when she talked about integrity, I was actually, because of my personality, I was diagnosed with bipolar. They were convinced okay, let's back this up. So like everything kind of fell apart for me in January of 2017. I had actually gone to a massage. I'd been working with this massage therapist for months. I totally trusted her, and she wanted to try myofascial release. And so she did. And it triggered a memory of me being raped. And I knew I was 12. I didn't know how I knew, but I knew I was 12 when in this memory. And I spent the next 2 hours just trying to figure out how the heck this could have happened, because I lived on a farm. I was completely isolated from the rest of the world. To go anywhere, someone had to drive me. I wasn't allowed to even ride a bike. So I'm like, how, where, when, how could this have happened? It was maddening. And then 2 days later, I had my therapy appointment, and we talked about it. And I remember her saying, hey, can we just put this on the shelf for now? I'm like, sure. Boom. And she's like, that was easy. I'm like, yeah. And then at the end of that session, I kind of got paralyzed and couldn't move. And then I heard this voice come out of my mouth saying, I need help, but no one can help me. And then there was just silence. And I was staring at the wall, and my therapist was off at the side. And finally she said, Laura, was that the 12-year-old talking? I'm like, and something snapped, and I found myself in the back of my head in this black space, and I could feel sense presences on either side of my head. I knew she was in front. It was completely black. There was like some wall, but I also intuitively knew that I knew how to get there. Not consciously how, I can't tell you how I do it, but I knew I could get there. And then in the next moment I was there, and then I could move again. And I turned to her and I said, how did you know? And she just shrugged and said, well, you look 12. I'm like, huh. And so then it was 2 days later. Thank God. 2 days later, I had my scheduled appointment with my prescriber, who was a psychologist. And I said, what the heck happened? And she's like, you dissociated. Oh, I finally had a word. And so I went home and I got on the computer and I looked it up, and I discovered a site called discussingdissociation.com. She was my godsend. I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. It was funny because I thought I had DID, but I didn't meet a lot of the criteria. Like when I did the screening, I thought, oh, maybe not. But yeah, so it took a few months. But yes, so it was like a few weeks later, a suicidal plan emerged. So I think it just got really chaotic inside from that trigger. And I didn't know at the time. This all seemed to be completely random, isolated events. And maybe that's the point. I have a fragmented mind, so I don't see connections in the moment. It wasn't until like 8 months later, I actually looked at my calendar and I started looking at what the dates when these things happen. I'm like, oh. So here I am in this hospital, and they're like, yeah, you have bipolar. And so they gave me medications. I'm like, oh, okay. Didn't work. Yeah, and I got Cyprexa, and that was a mess. So yeah, that was fun. But yeah, so eventually I talked with the specialist from Discussing Dissociation and said, oh honey, you're dissociative. And so it took me a while to get people to believe me. but I got there. We got there. So when you mentioned integrity, I thought structural dissociation. That's what it's called. It's called structural dissociation. And because all of my, what the psychologist that I worked with helped me understand was my memories are even fragmented. One part of me has the actual, like the story. Another part has the emotion. And then a different part has the body sensations. So in the beginning, all I was getting were body sensations, and it was driving me nuts. I was like feeling all of this sexual assault in all these different ways, different positions, it was really insane, and it was coming fast and hard. And I had no what, I had no who, I had no when, I had no where. I'm like, what? And yeah, so that was not fun. So to me, integrity, I think of structural integrity and being fragmented. I have no structural integrity. And I remember in 2017, I kept saying, I want my life back. I want my life back, because I truly believed I was a single-minded individual. And then suddenly this thing's happening. I'm like, no, no. but yet it was, I was welcoming it at the same time, because I think on some level I was finally starting to make sense of what my life had been like. And now that I look at it, because I remember that first time I went to the hospital, and I went to my sister and told her, I said, I'm going to the hospital because I'm suicidal. And apparently another part that I did not have any conscious experience giggled, and it made her really mad. And I had no idea. She told me later. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. That wasn't me. I didn't even know it was happening. And so I'm sure it was really confusing for the people at the hospital too, because here's this girl who like wants to, hurt herself suicidally, and has a really bright affect. I'm happy. It was just really bizarre.
I like that, you're able to see the different pieces and see the different layers. And I think that if you don't mind me kind of jumping in there for a second, because I think, because this is what's resonating for me as a person who is so intrigued by human psychology, right? I think for me, it would have been awesome, amazing, not necessarily to say to have DID, like I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is I think for me, it would have just been so amazing to be able to see all of my different layers and pieces, because for most of us, right? Like, for you, Laura, it was yes, definitely a journey in getting that diagnosis. It was yes, definitely a journey getting into the recovery process, right? In the healing of all of those different layers. And I know that you struggled with finding that right fit for you, right? Like the right location where you found your relief, and I can't wait, because we're going to talk about that specifically in a future episode that we've talked about. But I think, wow, it would have been, for me, if I would have been able to see, that 4-year-old who experienced her first sexual assault, that the trauma, from witnessing things that, no young child should have to witness, but also being able to see some of my other very specific layers, because I have very distinct memories of being a child. I was a perfectionist, overachiever, reading, writing, doing arithmetic, playing chess at 4, classical piano at 5.5, competitively swimming at 6.5. And I was always striving to be perfect. Like everything had to be perfect. And I remember my siblings telling me I was conceited all the time. But really it was, I felt unseen. I felt disposable. I felt, that my thoughts, my feelings, my needs, my wants, my desires, weren't heard. I was always, pushed aside. I was teased and told that, I was the milkman's baby. And you think that they're innocent, and maybe for some people they would have been able to laugh that off. But for whatever reason on the inside of me, I felt consistently disposable. I felt displaced. I felt like I didn't belong. And I felt like if I could just be perfect, like that would all go away. And if I would have been able to see all of those different things without having to, without my journey, but then I wouldn't be where I am. But if I would have been able to see some of those things, I would have understood my nightmares that I had reoccurring from as early as of a memory of 4 all the way through till after I met my husband, which was, wow, when I learned what other outside of, my own child that I gave birth to, what true unconditional positive regard was. Right? Like my nightmares didn't stop until I had him in my life. Mm-hmm. And those nightmares looked like me standing in the middle of my driveway at my, childhood home, able to see everybody in my life milling around and doing things and interacting and yada, yada, flailing my arms, screaming at the top of my lungs, but not being able to be seen or heard. And so, when we add in all of the other highly significant traumas that, happened throughout my life up to the age of 25, it really becomes where it makes sense. It makes complete sense why I picked up alcohol at the age of 12, picked up cigarettes at the age of 12. It makes complete sense why that numbing out, or that, that I learned how to seek relief from things outside of myself. I was doing it already. That perfectionism. I was reaching out to anything that might make me look perfect in somebody else's eyes. And I was constantly seeking something outside of me to make me worthy or valuable or valid to anybody. And then when I realized that was, really my locus of control was staying stuck in this external position that we're all born in. So when I learned about the locus of control theory, and I started engaging in effective psychological tactics and practices to get myself in that internal position, which is where I operate now, right? Inside me, living free from all negative attachments, from needing anything outside of myself to feel valuable or valid. That was like my aha. And it makes everything make sense. And it also affords me that ability to say, you know what, I wouldn't change my journey or my story in any way, shape, or form, because if I did, if my life would have looked different, I would be a totally different person, and I wouldn't be sitting right where I am. And I believe that at 50 plus years old, I am living my purpose. I'm living in my purpose. I am, creating my true meaning of self every day. But anyway, so thank you for that. I think that really shines a light on, between the three of us there, to show people like, hey, integrity in a recovery process means what it needs to mean for you. And so if we look at our spirituality piece of pie in our life balance wheel, part of that looks like my morals, my ethics, my integrity, which stems from whatever that is, whether it's organized religion or a spiritual connection with our earth, the universe, whatever it is for you. It's very personal to me. I generally don't, dive into that. It's a whole other ball of wax. But, so I think, that's extremely important for people to hear. But I think also what people might need to hear in this space, and I know that we are, again, we're never going to get this done in 30 minutes, I don't think, because there are so many different things that we can touch on. So I'd like to ask you guys to each, think about this for a minute, but then, come in and share. And I'll start with Octavia again. And I'd like to just hear a couple things that you can give to people with regard to motivation, inspiration, and commitment, right? Because for me, my motivation, sure, I can think of many over that, again, because the recovery journey for me has been 25 years long. I've only been sober for 8, and I've been in this mindset, this mind frame, in this way of existing for 8 years. But my motivation was that physiological addiction, that lack of control, that I can feel my liver working when I lay down at night to go to sleep. I can feel the improper functioning of my blood pressure, of my heart, of, all of my system, right? My entire organ system was just not functioning right. And I remember laying there and thinking, wow, I don't want to go out like this. Like, I don't want this to be me. And I have a grandmother who had cirrhosis of the liver, and for 18 years fought the cirrhosis of the liver, in and out of comas, in and out of times where we thought this is going to be it. And it wasn't. And this was even after quitting drinking. And I'm like, holy cow, I don't want to quit drinking and have that be my life. Now, do I struggle with, pancreatitis off and on? Absolutely. Do I watch my liver functions 100%? Am I very mindful to not, take things that are going to make my liver work harder? 100%. But anyway, so I had this motivation, and then that motivation transitioned into the inspiration to want to see myself in a very specific light, in a very specific fashion. And then, becoming committed to myself to create that, and to be confident enough to walk my life the way that I saw fit, right? This is my life too. This is my mantra. This is my life too. It gets to look, feel, be however I want it to. I get to choose, right? Which means I get to choose how I respond or react to my environment or the people within it. I get to choose if I allow something to derail me or not. I get to choose to stay in my peace, my comfort, my joy organically. And so, it wasn't just that, but it was, it was a lot of things. It was my pride, which of course has shifted and changed and grown and morphed over the last 8 years into, something completely different than what it was then. But to just all of a sudden go, whoa, wait a minute. I'm a special being. I have so many reasons to live. Like, I don't want this to be it for me. And this isn't working. And I'm going to go do something about it. And then I took 2 months to research, to investigate. I actually cultivated relationships with the staff before I even arrived. Like, I think they got sick of me, because I was calling them and I was really talking to them all the time, and, what's this going to look like? And then I'd have another question. What's that going to look like? And then I had a plan, and I went around and I told every place that I bought alcohol in my community, I told them I'm going to treatment. I'm blah, blah, blah. I had just announced it to the world beforehand. And I even told the pharmacist, like, I'm going to treatment. I don't want, like, no more benzos. There'll be no more benzos for me. There'll be no more controlled substances for me, yada, yada. And it was really cool, because when I came back to my environment, my dear friend who was the check stand, the checker at my grocery store and at the pharmacy, everybody was super interested. And so this allowed me to find my motivation, my inspiration, and my commitment, and also be able to start leading by example without even intending to do that. Like, to me, that's like was the starting of this integrity as a recovery lifestyle enthusiast, as a recovery lifestyle speaker, as a recovery lifestyle coach, as a professional who works with people every day. Like, it was the start for me. And that, anyway, that's, for me, like, that is just like, it's the bee's knees. If I could give it like a really, let me date myself saying.
I actually used to take myself out on dates because I needed to learn how to listen to myself, because that silent voice, that your internal voice, that is the most influential voice that you have. And for me, that was old stuff. That was other people that was influencing what I was capable of, how I was feeling, anything like that. And so I had a mentor who would send me to the grocery store, and I had to listen to my intuition. So do you want, Cooner's peas or Jolly Green Giant peas? And I'd have to wait, and I'd have to wait for that internal voice to say, you want Jolly Green Giant peas. Okay, I want Jolly Green Giant peas. Or going places. I went on a weekend trip where every stop sign, I asked myself, my internal self, which do I turn left or do I turn right? And so where you end up, and I learned that when I listen to myself, I end up in the coolest places. The other thing that was important for me is stop listening to what other people thought of my emotions. I had to learn how to identify my emotions and what was I truly feeling. And then if I knew that I was feeling sadness, then I could appropriately respond. And one day somebody said to me, do you know that you really describe where you feel? Because, when you feel emotion, you have a biological response, you have a physiological response. And so people don't pay attention to that. They just think, like, for me, for a long time, I was, broken up over this guy, right? And I thought it was so sad and I couldn't get over him. Really, by going through the process of understanding the true emotion, I was feeling disgust. And once I realized, oh, I'm disgusted with him, not sad that he's in my life, and I could move on and move on to the next thing. Yeah. And so that's one of the things that I specialize in, is helping people understand who they are in that internal voice at their soul level, so that you can get a hold of the influence, of the true influence that's happening in your life. And that's been so important for me.
Wow. That sounds awesome.
Thank you. And some people call it spirituality. I call it tapping into my own intuition. And, one of my sayings is igniting a revolution of recovery. So you're the revolutionary. You're the one who's going to ignite anything in your life. And that is so cool to be able to do that and take that out of other people's responsibility. We're dumping all of that on everyone else. I have a partner who doesn't play that game with me, and I've tried. And he's very supportive, and he's like, no, we're going to walk through this together, and you're going to say your own opinion. And I don't get away with, I don't care, or I don't know what I'm feeling. That doesn't happen in our household.
That's awesome though. That's extremely healthy. And, we all need to, everybody, benefits from learning, the power of inquiry and active listening. And, we could go into the tactics, but we don't need to go into the tactics. So Laura, tell me, or share with us, how your motivation, your inspiration, and your commitment, as briefly as you can, so that we can let all these wonderful folks go back to their.
Yeah. The thing I learned is I had to listen to those inner wounded parts, and I had to believe them, and I had to trust them. And I remember at the trauma program I got into, she said, look, if you don't do internal dialogue, this is going to turn out sideways and you're going to go the wrong way. Because if they weren't feeling safe, they acted out through self-harm or suicidal ideation. That's what happened. And so you've got to start listening to them, and you've got to start talking to them. And so I think that's true for anybody who's dealing with unresolved trauma. You're dealing with wounded children inside, and they need love, they need care, and they need comfort. And so I used stuffed animals, I cuddled, we talked, it was like, okay, I have to learn how to be the captain of the ship, because you guys have had to be doing the taking over whenever things got rough. And so I remember Janina Fisher is a wonderful treatment person for DID. And she said, it is very difficult. Okay, so the core person who's got the chronological history is considered the apparently normal part. And then the other parts are called the emotional parts. And she said it is almost impossible to get the apparently normal part to practice self-love. They can't do it. But if you can get them to start loving those inner children, they can do that. And that's your way into teaching them self-love.
Wow.
So
It's so fascinating, Laura. Thank you so much for sharing it. I love your story. It's very inspirational.
I love it because I find it to be so losing my words. I find it to be very transferable to all of us. Like it illustrates so eloquently what we all struggle with. It's because it's at such an animated fashion, right? Like, because you can animate each piece, and it is so helpful. It's so beneficial because just as you were talking about, the children and needing to nurture them, and how you talk to them, and how you love them, and you gave them stuffed animals, and these different things. Like, we all need to be paying attention to that within ourselves. Like, all the different years, if we have to, like whatever, like what did you experience at the, what do you need to love on and let go? Or what do you need to package up and put away? What do you need to leave in the round can? What is it? Or what parts do you need to just love and embrace about yourself? Because that's something that I had to learn, right?
Yeah.
Like, whatever, like that, it's just who I am. Like, I fought being an addict for a really long time, but you know what, the fact of the matter is, if I look back historically, like until I learned what I know now, like I couldn't even eat just one cookie. Like I remember sitting down and going, eating 13 pancakes one day, and just because there's a whole big story about that, because people are like, what are you talking about? I thought you said you were anorexic. I'm like, well, I was in that season of my life. I was very anorexic. I mean, I went down to 88 pounds. But then there was another season of my life where it was like, food, or many other seasons of my life that were food. And then there was the dysmorphia that set in after, experiencing weight fluctuations, and then this dysmorphia set in, and then that hung around. And, so there's so many different layers and seasons. So where we may not all be able to, identify with the actual diagnosis of DID, we can identify with different seasons of living, and we can take pieces of people that have had to walk maybe a higher severity recovery journey than us, and go, wow, that's cool. How can I edit, delete, make that my own, or apply it to me, or at least associate with it, right? So anyway, you ladies are fantastic. You're amazing. It is 12:50. I actually have clients at 1:00. So I do need to run. I want to thank you again. Mastering the Drop will be live next week on Over 40 Fearless and Free. So what I will do is anybody that wants an invitation can absolutely send me a direct message. I will invite you to that. I will do my best to record my portion of that. And actually, I'll probably just record it on a separate device so that I can put it here on the Turning Leaves page as well. And then every week, it may not be at noon, it may not be at 2, but every week we are either going to be live, or there will be a live recording posted for you guys to watch. Next month in April, we have a whole new set of topics that we're going to be going into and talking about. And anyway, thank you guys so much. Don't forget, give me some time, because we did run so late. I will be dropping everybody's contact information into the comment section below, so you'll be able to reach out to me. I have a free gift I'm dropping in there this week. I will put Laura and Octavia's contact information in there. And we will also be putting this replay on YouTube. So feel free to go over there and follow. Then that way, if you miss any of the weeks coming up, you'll be able to see those replays. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much.